Welcome to Coffee and a Chat. I'm Mama Angie. I was thinking about a few videos ago, Mama Angie still rocks and rolls. Okay, so I don't know what's happened to my coffee, but we'll still call it's still Coffee and a Chat, even though I've somehow misplaced the coffee. So I had just done a video about how God saved my daughter Autumn. And I had said that I wanted to tell the story about the time that I believe God extended my dad's life by 10 years for a specific purpose. So I thought I'm going to give it a try, see if I can get this down. So, my dad, well, first, in the Bible, because does God ever extend a person's life? I mean, it says that we all were given, ordained, that God ordained so many days for each of our lives before they ever existed, and he wrote them down in his book. So, I've said before, we all come with an expiration date. And, the day of my birth was chosen. The day that I go home to be with the Lord is chosen. And that's how it is, right? But there's this king in the Bible whose name is Hezekiah. And Hezekiah got sick, and he called for the prophet to see if this was to death, or the prophet came. I can't remember. I should have read the story again before so I'm not going to really tell the story because I don't want to do it wrong. But basically, God let him know that you're going to die from this. And Hezekiah was a good king, and he didn't want to die from it. And so he asked the Lord and cried out to God. I remember it says that he turned and faced the wall and began to cry out to God and said, haven't I been faithful in this? Haven't I been faithful in that? And so God blessed Hezekiah and extended his life by 15 years. So Hezekiah lived 15 years longer than what was originally planned for his life. So we know that God does sometimes, for whatever reason that he may have, he extends a person's life. So about 10 years before my dad actually passed away, almost to the day, my dad had been very, very ill. He had double fungal pneumonia. He had spent a week with his oxygen percentages down in the 70s instead of the 90s because they couldn't get him up because his lungs were so full. And it was a huge battle. And I was actually, my dad, I knew he'd been sick, and he was sick, and so I was driving. It was like a 7-hour drive, or I don't remember how long it was, 5-hour drive, something. It was a pretty long drive from where I lived to where they lived, which was a whole nother state. And so I had told my mom, I'm coming in the morning, because she goes, your dad's really sick. And I don't know. And she had health problems. So I said, don't worry, I'll come in the morning, because it was late that night. I'll get up and I'll come, and then I'll help you guys out and do whatever we need to do. Well, he took a real bad turn, and they ended up having to take him to the hospital. And so then I was definitely on my way. And as I was driving there, I got a call, and it was my mom trying to explain that, and she doesn't even remember this, or she doesn't remember any of that now because she's passed away. But at the time, she didn't even remember making the call. But she had said, they don't think your father's going to make it, and you need to get here as quick as you can. So I was like, okay. And so I just, right or wrong, I asked the Lord to give me safe passage and not let anything slow me down or stop me. And I stepped on that gas, and the speed limit was 55 in most of the places where I was driving. A couple places it was 60 and 65, but I was driving 75, 80. I was going past state patrol cars. And I mean, the freeway just cleared up in front of me. There were no cars, and I'm just zooming down that road to get there. I was going past state patrol, and they didn't even seem to notice me. It was, I believe God was extending me some grace, even though I was speeding, but he was getting me there to my dad. So I got to my dad in record time. In fact, I couldn't even account for how fast I got there, because even that didn't make sense. I had just come into the state where my mom and dad lived when my mom had called me. I mean, I'd just come across the border, which was only like a half an hour or 40 minutes away from where I lived. So I had just gotten on the road, but I got there in record time. I got to the hospital. When I walked in, I gave them my dad's name. They told me the room. I was able to go straight up to the room. And if you know me, that's a miracle because I get lost. And as I was coming, because he was in ICU, and as I was coming down the hall, my Uncle Harold was there. And he stepped out. He was watching for me. And I said, is he okay? And he goes, and my uncle had been crying. And he's like, it's not good, Angie. It's not good. And he's, your dad's not going to be walking out of this hospital. He's not going to be leaving from here. And I'm like, okay, so it's bad. And he's like, yeah, it's bad. And so I went in and, oh, my dad, it was so hard to see him so frail in that bed. And, so, I talked to him and, and stayed with him. And then my mom, they had taken her home to try and get her to sleep a little bit. So I told him, I'm going to check on Mom, and I'll bring her back when she wakes up and everything. And so we went for several days, and he just kept getting worse and worse. And there were several times when they thought, when they called us to his bedside and said they didn't think he was going to make it, but nothing ever felt like that was really it yet, but still we'd go to his bedside. Well, then there was this one night, and I think it was towards the end of that first week. And they said, he's not going to make it through the night. And he was so fragile. He could hardly talk. And we knew he wasn't going to make it. And so the only ones there was my mom and myself, and my younger brother was there. And we gathered around my dad's bed, and my mom was across from me there, and my younger brother was there. And then to the side of me, this is a weird thing, and I'm not into, ghosts or anything like that, but my oldest brother had committed suicide about 3 years prior to this. But I had the strangest sense that I could feel him in that room. And when I look back in my mind, I see him standing to the side of me, even though, So I don't know, just one of those weird things, and I've never been able to shake it. So I don't know what God, what he maybe allows or doesn't allow. So maybe my brother's spirit was there for a little bit, maybe not. I don't know. I just could, and maybe it was just me feeling, like an incomplete family. And so I don't know. Just putting it out there because it's part of when I'm telling the story, I just can't get past that sensation that he was there. So when we were talking to my dad, and of course we're all telling him we love him and how great he was, and how, thanking him for being such a good dad and a good husband and everything. And he got to a point where he wanted to talk. And so we got really quiet and we're listening to him, and his voice was so small. But he said, because he said, now when you come back in the morning and I'm not here, you know where I'll be. And we're like, yeah, we do. We know where you'll be. We're not worried about that. And he said, but I wish God would give me just 5 more minutes. Because if God would just give me 5 more minutes, I would talk to, and he named one of his grandchildren. And then he said, I would talk to them about the Lord. If God would just give me 5 more minutes, I'd talk to, and then he named another grandchild. I want to talk to them about Jesus. Then the third time he goes, if God would just give me 5 more minutes, I would talk to, and then he named this teenage boy that he had met up with my family, and who had sat down with my dad and talked to him for hours because he wanted to know about God. And my dad said, I would like to talk to him for 5 more minutes about the Lord. And so it was a very touching thing, but that's all, he goes, that's all I want is just 5 more minutes to tell one more person about Jesus. And then he was pretty weak and falling asleep, and normally we would have stayed through the night with him, but like I've said, my mother's health was really, really bad, and it was very bad at that time. And I wasn't sure who was going to go first, her or my dad. It was pretty difficult. And so I knew I needed to get her to where she could lay down and stuff, and it wasn't going to happen in the ICU. And she had said, I have a piece, I think we should go home. And so I said, okay. And so my brother helped me, and we got her into the car, and I took her home and got her tucked into bed. And I thought, I'm not even going to be able to sleep because I'm waiting for the phone to ring, because we just ignore this light and turn it back on. And so she's, I just, the nurses had said, we'll call you as soon as something happens, so you know. Well, I woke up, and it was morning, and nothing had woke me up. And it was like maybe 6 a.m. And I'm checking my phone, and I hadn't missed a call. And so I called the hospital and got the ICU floor. And I'm like, told them who I was. And, I said, we've been waiting for, we thought we'd get a call in the night. And the nurse goes, no, he didn't pass away. He's still with us. And I said, is he okay? And she goes, yeah, are you coming down here pretty soon? And I said, yeah, as soon as get some clothes on my mom, we're on our way. And about this time, my mom's waking up, and she's like, did he die? Did he die? And I'm like, no, Mom, he's still there. And so she goes, well, let's get down there. So we got dressed up dressed as quick as we could. And we're just thinking, and the nurse was like, you need to come now. And so I'm thinking, oh, now he's going to die, right? So we get in the car, and we're going, and we're just kind of crying and talking as we go, trying to get to the hospital as quick as we can, and without, becoming patients ourselves. And, and we're just like, oh, we're going to, so God let him make it long enough for Mom to get the rest she needed so we can go back, and we're going to be with him as, when he passes away. And, and my brother was, an hour or more away, and we're like, we were like, should we call him, or what should we do? And then my mom said, let's wait and see what we find when we get to the hospital. So I said, okay. So we get to the hospital, and we go up to the ICU, and our hearts are pounding because we think we're coming to his deathbed. And the nurses are like, oh, no, you're not coming. No, just go in there, you're not coming to his deathbed. And so we're like, what is going on? So we walk into his room, and there he is, sitting up in bed, eating breakfast. It's like nothing was wrong. And I'm like, what is going on? He goes, I don't know. I just got better in the night, and I'm feeling pretty good now. Having a little breakfast. You want some? Well, okay, so something changed, right? And we didn't know exactly what was going on, because sometimes before a person passes away, they get this big burst of energy, and you think they're getting better, and then it turns out they're not. But no, my dad was getting better, but he wasn't okay. He still was very sick. He still ended up being put into a chemical-induced coma so they could vacuum out his lungs. It was still a fight for his life, but something had changed. And so pretty soon the doctors we've done everything we can do for him. We don't know if he's going to get better or not. This may be as good as it gets, but he seems to be okay. So we're just going to take him through the process in the hospital, because they had to take him from ICU to intermediate care to regular care, and then off to the nursing home for rehab. And and there's a whole little thing that he had to go through. So they go, we're just going to keep taking him through. He has to, at least spend an hour on, each floor before he can, and so they took him out of ICU and took him to the middle section, the intermediate care or whatever. And he was there for about an hour, and then they had a bed in the regular care. So they sent him to a regular room, and then he stayed there overnight. Well, they got a bed for him at rehab, and then they took him to rehab. And then at rehab, we thought they called us in, my mom and I, in the middle of the night, because he told them to call us because he wasn't going to make it. And he didn't want to make it at that point. He was pretty depressed about how, going through all this and being sick, and it just wasn't going well for him. And so my mom and I went, and again, but as we went in there in the middle of the night, which is a whole nother story, and we went in there to talk to him. As we began to talk, well, one of the guys that worked with was one of the guys working with my dad. He had called me out in the hall, and he said, he should be getting better, but he just doesn't seem to have a will to get better. And so I'm like, okay. He goes, we're here for you. He may go ahead and pass now because he just doesn't seem to have a will to live. And so we went, I went back in the room and I said, Dad, you almost died at the hospital. In fact, I think you were supposed to die. It was like, that was it. That was your moment in life. And we said our goodbyes, but you said, if God would give you 5 more minutes, you talk to this person, and 5 more minutes and you talk to this one, and 5 more and you talk to this one. And now he's given you more than 5 more minutes and you're in rehab to get better so you can go home, but you don't want to. You're wanting to give up. And I just, and I'm not normally like that. I'm usually a lot more, your life, you get to do what you want to do. Your death, you can die the way you want to do. It's, I'm not real pushy about these things, but I felt kind of like a fight in me. And I think it was the Lord coming on me. I really do. And I'm like, here, God's given you this, and you're in here feeling sorry for yourself when maybe you should be doing the exercises they're asking you to do, and, and whatever, and getting stronger so you can come home to take your 5 more minutes to tell these people about Jesus. And he's like, you're right. So he dismissed my mom and I, sent us home, and started doing what he was supposed to do. And so eventually we were able to get him out of rehab and come home, and he came home a whole different person. Now, we knew he did not come home the same way he was when he left. My dad had definite dementia, and when they did a brain scan later, they were able to, with no question, they knew he had Alzheimer's. But that Alzheimer's maybe was part of God's plan, because it softened him and made him into the sweetest little boy after we got through the wild teenager. But my dad and I butt heads a couple of times, because for the next 10 years, I took care of my dad and my mom for 8 of those 10. So I took care of my parents, and my dad, his health kept going downhill and whatever, but his spirits never did. And I can tell you that for that next 10 years, my dad spent all his time, every person he came in contact with, what do you think about Jesus? Do you know Jesus? Do you know that God loves you? Oh, you said to have a blessed day. I've got to ask you, what does that mean to you? And all he did, no matter how bad the dementia was, it never took away from him sharing Christ. And my dad, I remember him one day saying, Angie, I think I'm telling people about Jesus more now than I have in my entire life. And I was like, yeah, Dad, I think you are. And he'd go, I hope it doesn't embarrass you. And it's like, are you kidding me? I think it's the most wonderful thing in the world. Well, he got to a point where, they kept wanting to do procedures and give him more medication and he didn't want to do any of that. And he was 88 years old. And he's like, so the cardiologist had called up, or the nurse practitioner for the cardiologist called us and said, we want to do a stress test on him. And he's, I had him on speakerphone, and he's like, I don't want to do a stress test. Why do you want me to do a stress test? And they go, so we can see how the heart is working, because you have heart disease, and we need to see if there's any new problems. He goes, well, what are you going to do if there is a new problem? Well, then we would want to do a procedure. You've had many procedures before. It would just be one more to make sure that the arteries are open. He goes, I don't want any more procedures. And so, the gal, she had taken care of my mom too. I'd gotten to know this nurse practitioner quite well. And so she goes, what do you think? And I go, he's 88. And if he doesn't want to, I don't see why we're, what are we trying to save here? God's kept him alive, and I don't want to make him miserable. He's happy, he's comfortable. And that's what he wants to do. I think we honor that, because that's usually who I am. And so she goes, okay, but the cardiologist is going to be really upset with me. She goes, because he doesn't feel that way about anything. You do surgery whenever you need to surgery. You give pills whenever you need pills, and you save everybody. If they're 150, maybe you can give them another day. And that cardiologist was that way. I remember the first time we saw him, he's like, I'm the best there is, and you're lucky to have me. I was like, okay. So anyway, she said, do you think that you could get him to come in Monday and let us run an EKG on him? And so he goes, what's that? And I go, well, that's when they stick the stickers all over you and, and just measure your heart waves. Yeah, that's fine. That don't hurt or nothing. That's fine. I'll do that. So I go, okay, we'll do that. So she set up the time. And so I took him in on Monday. And so we got there and they put us in the little room and the little lab gal came in to do the, to hook him up and run it. Well, the machine wouldn't work right. And so she took it out and she goes, I am so sorry. She goes, I know I don't want to have to keep you here. And she goes, but this machine's not working. She goes, I don't know what the problem is. So she went and got another machine. It wouldn't work either. And so, and she was getting really flustered. And I said, look, it's fine. We've got no place else to go, nothing else to do. We're fine. And Dad was just enjoying visiting with her and whatnot, but he hadn't said anything about God yet, which was a little bit unusual because usually that was the first thing. But he was just talking to her, wanted to know, was she married and did she have kids? Well, she had just gotten married, but she didn't have kids yet. And so, oh, what's your husband like? And, is he a good guy? I hope it, and so he's just chit-chatting with her. And so finally she gets a machine in there that worked. And she was just like, I just apologize. I go, no, it's fine. Everything happens for a reason. I really believe that. See, here we go. Even the light goes out for a reason. I don't know what the reason is, but whatever. So keep me moving. So anyway, she finally got it done and she goes, okay, well, I'll have these tapes for the doctor to look at and, and they'll give you a call if there's anything that, that they need to tell you about. So we're like, okay. And my dad said, but before I leave, let me ask you a question. I'm like, here it is. And she goes, okay. And he goes, what do you think about Jesus? She goes, Jesus? He goes, yeah, Jesus Christ, God's son. What do you think about him? And she goes, I don't think I've ever given him a thought at all. But the way you ask me, I think maybe I should give it a thought. And he goes, you should. He goes, it's the most important thing you're ever going to think about. So I hope you remember that a weird old man was in here today and he asked you what you think about Jesus. And when you think about that, I hope you will think about Jesus. And then I think he said something because he's thinking about you or whatever. I don't know. And she goes, I will. And it was something about the way she said it. I was like going, oh my word, she will. And I know she will. Like there's something powerful just happened here. And so we stepped out of the exam room and then we needed to go down the hall this way. And she went that way, to go to the next exam room that she had to do something. And I just stopped for a minute. I said, Dad, that was very significant right there. He goes, do you think so? And I go, yeah. I go, I've been watching you for 10 years. I go, ever since you almost died, I go, I've always believed God extended your life because you kept saying if I had 5 more minutes that I would share Christ. And I go, and for 10 years, you've stayed alive and that's all you've done consistently in your life, no matter what's going on, is you always share Christ. You've shared Christ with everybody that would ever say a word to you, that would have a conversation with you. All you've done is you share Christ with them. And he goes, well, I just want to do right by God. And I go, oh, you have. And I got kind of emotional. And he's like, what's wrong? And I said, Dad, what if she was your last assignment? Because see, my dad wanted to go home to be with the Lord really bad. He'd wake up and be like, I don't understand why I'm still here. His mom was the same way too. She was 96, I think, when she died, or 94, something like that. She died of old age, but she didn't understand. She was ready to go home and the Lord kept her here for whatever reason. And my dad kind of was that way too. I mean, Mom's gone. I'm ready to go home. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm like, Dad, what if that was the last assignment you had? The last person that you still needed to share Christ with. And you just did it. Because I can tell you, I feel like I can promise you, that gal, oh, she's going to think about Jesus. She's going to think about him a lot. Because you asked her that question. God used that. And I go, what if? And he goes, well, I suppose if that was my last assignment, I'll get to go home real soon now. And I said, yep, I suppose you will. I go, I kind of hope it's not because I'm not ready to let you go. And he goes, oh, I know. But he goes, when it's time for me to go, don't you be sad. It's okay. I'll be happy. And I'm like, Dad, I'll still be sad. And we just kind of, bantered back and forth, went out to make his next appointment, got in the car and went home. That was Monday. Sunday morning, following that Monday, is when I woke up and found he'd gone home to be with the Lord. So I believe very strongly that God extended my dad's life 10 years so he could share with one more person after another, because I don't even know, probably thousands of people that my dad shared Christ in some little way, asking a little question or something, just a little old man with dementia that they enjoyed talking to. But I believe that little gal that day, that she was his last assignment. And then his job was done, and he got to go home, which was what he wanted more than anything. Whew. Just been wanting to share that with you. So there it is. All right, you guys. Do you have one more assignment? 1,000 more assignments? Whatever. I hope my life counts for Christ, like my dad's did. I want to be that focused. My dad, that 10 years, that really moved on my heart. And the years of that Marvin knew my dad, it moved on his heart too. It made us both want to be better at sharing the Lord with people. So he had an impact on us too. I think we were part of his assignment. That's good. That's good. All right. I do love you guys. I don't even want to go through the subscribe and all that. Not today. I hope you do, but I just want to tell you guys I love you and I appreciate you. And I thank the Lord for the plans that he has for your life. So you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.